There's a gap under the Sphinx's paws that scientists found more than 30 years ago. Nobody has ever opened it. The Great Pyramid, just a few hundred feet away, has already given up hidden rooms to modern scanners. But this one spot under the Sphinx has sat there, untouched, since 1991. And the reason isn't some cover-up. It's something much stranger than that. This isn't a story about a secret door swinging open. Nobody has walked into a painted room under the Sphinx. Nobody has proof of a hidden library. What's real is smaller and honestly more interesting. Deep scanners have picked up a gap in the rock. Nobody can say for sure what that gap actually is. And that unanswered question just exploded back into the spotlight thanks to an Italian engineer, a set of new radar claims, and one massive podcast appearance. By the time this video ends, you'll know exactly what scientists have found under the Sphinx, and exactly why nobody has confirmed what it actually is. Let's start with the monument itself, because the mystery only makes sense once you understand what you're looking at. The Sphinx isn't built out of stacked blocks like the pyramids. It's one single piece of limestone, carved right out of the ground. It has the body of a lion and the head of a person, and it faces straight toward the sunrise. Most archaeologists date it to around 2500 BCE during the reign of a pharaoh named Khafre. That's roughly the same age as the pyramids next to it. Nobody has found a sign carved into the Sphinx that says, Khafre built this. That inscription doesn't exist. Instead, archaeologists connect the dots using everything around it. The Sphinx sits right beside Khafre's pyramid. Stone cut out to make the Sphinx was reused to build a nearby temple. Statues of Khafre were found close by. Put together, it looks like one big construction project, not a random monument dropped into the sand. But here's where things get complicated. The Sphinx is carved from layers of limestone, and those layers aren't all the same strength. Soft layers have worn away fast. Hard layers barely eroded at all. The head, made of tougher stone, held up much better than the body. In over 4,500 years, the Sphinx has been buried in sand, dug back out, repaired, buried again, and repaired some more, again and again. It isn't a time capsule sealed the day it was finished. It's more like a house that's been renovated a dozen times. There's proof of that going back thousands of years. A pharaoh named Thutmose left a stone tablet between the Sphinx's paws describing a dream. In the dream, the half-buried Sphinx spoke to him and promised him the throne if he dug it out of the sand. That tablet is over 3,000 years old. Even back then, ancient Egyptians already treated the Sphinx as old, sacred, and in need of saving. Every generation since has added its own layer on top. So when modern scanners pick up something strange under the surface, the question isn't just, is there a room down there? The real question is when that feature formed, whether people built it, and how it fits into a monument that's been changed over and over for thousands of years. That question got serious in the early 1990s. A geophysicist named Thomas Debicki and a geologist named Robert Schoch ran a seismic survey around the Sphinx. This wasn't a treasure hunt. It was real science, with a real goal: measure how the limestone had weathered and check for hidden gaps in the rock underneath. Seismic scanning doesn't work like an X-ray. It doesn't take a photo of what's underground. Instead, scientists send vibrations into the ground and time how fast those vibrations travel. Solid rock behaves one way. Cracked or hollow rock behaves differently. By measuring that, over and over, from many spots, they can build a rough map of what's below. Their report described a real finding, and it's one that shows up in the official science paper, not just online rumors, a series of cavities on the sides of the Sphinx and between its paws. One anomaly stood out the most. Some later researchers described it as a rectangular gap, roughly 40 feet by 30 feet, sitting about 15 feet underground, right in front of the monument. That's close to the number people repeat online today. But here's the part that almost every viral video leaves out. The seismic survey never opened that space. Nobody sent a camera down. Nobody found carved walls or ancient paint. All the scan showed was that this one patch of ground behaved differently than the rock around it. That's a real, measurable signal. It is not proof of a hidden room. And the gap between the instrument saw something weird and we found a secret chamber turns out to be the single most important fact in this entire story. That explains the basic seismic finding. But it doesn't explain why this anomaly got tangled up with an even bigger, messier debate: how old the Sphinx really is. Schoch was pulled into that fight by a writer named John Anthony West. West argued the deep grooves worn into the Sphinx's enclosure looked like they were carved by heavy rain, not just wind and blowing sand. If that's true, the Sphinx enclosure would have to be much older than the traditional date, from a time when Egypt's climate was wetter. That idea became known as the Sphinx water erosion hypothesis. To supporters, those rounded vertical channels look exactly like ancient rainfall damage. Most Egyptologists and many geologists don't buy it, and their pushback is worth explaining honestly. Giza's limestone is a mess of hard and soft layers, and it reacts badly to salt. Moisture creeps into the porous stone, Dissolved salt crystallizes inside it, and over centuries that slowly breaks the rock apart from the inside out. That process alone can carve deep, rounded grooves, no ancient monsoon required. Conservation teams are still fighting that same salt damage today. So the disagreement isn't about whether the Sphinx is badly weathered. Everyone agrees. It is. The disagreement is about what caused it. And this matters for our mystery because if the Sphinx really does have multiple building phases from different eras, any hidden chamber underneath becomes almost impossible to date with confidence. A room down there could belong to one era while the statue above it belongs to another entirely. Then came the 2000s, and a wave of new scanning technology raised everyone's expectations. Inside the Great Pyramid, a technique called muon imaging, which tracks tiny particles, raining down from space, actually did find a hidden void above the Grand Gallery in 2017. Later scans found a corridor near the pyramid's north face too. Those were real, independently confirmed discoveries. But they happened inside the Great Pyramid, not under the Sphinx. Online videos love to blur that line, making it sound like every new Giza scan is part of one giant secret tunnel system. It isn't. The Sphinx has its own separate scanning history, and it needs to be judged on its own. Stick with me here, because the next part is exactly why this old mystery blew up again this year. Different scanning tools measure completely different things. Ground radar sends electric signals into shallow ground. Seismic waves travel through solid rock. Muon detectors track particles falling from space through massive stone structures. And satellite radar, which bounces microwave signals off the ground from orbit, is the least reliable of all of them for seeing deep underground. That last one is exactly what an Italian engineer named Filippo Biondi has been using to make some very big claims. Biondi and his team say their satellite radar shows deep shafts, spiral structures, and massive chambers hundreds of meters under the Giza plateau, including under the Sphinx. If that turns out to be true, it would rewrite everything we know about ancient Egypt. But nobody has physically confirmed any of it. No drill has reached those depths. No camera has seen those shapes in person. And a lot of geophysicists doubt that satellite radar can even see that deep or that clearly through solid limestone in the first place. That doesn't mean the signal is fake. It means a claim that big needs proof that big. And right now, that proof doesn't exist yet. This is exactly where Joe Rogan comes in. His podcast didn't discover anything new. What it did was take a niche, disputed scientific claim and put it in front of millions of people overnight. Biondi described shafts, tunnels, and giant chambers, and Rogan asked the question everyone watching was thinking, if this is real, doesn't that change everything we know about history? It's a gripping conversation. The models look precise. The scale sounds massive. But a podcast can present a claim. It can't verify one. Real confirmation would take other scientists reproducing the same results, using different methods, and eventually, we're allowed, testing the ground directly. Until that happens, Biondi's giant underground structures stay claims, not discoveries. Compare that to the older 1991 seismic anomaly, and it's almost funny how much smaller and more solid that older claim actually is. We know a real peer-reviewed study happened. We know it reported cavities between the Sphinx's paws. We know the data showed a real measurable gap in the rock. What we still don't know is whether that gap is an ancient man-made room. That's a much narrower mystery than giant hidden cities under Giza, but it's a real one. And it raises an obvious question. Why, after more than 30 years, has nobody just gone down there to check? The answer isn't some hidden conspiracy. The Sphinx is one of the most fragile, most important monuments on Earth. Drilling into it isn't like digging a test hole in an empty field. Every cut risks the stone's stability, its water balance, its salt levels, and repairs that are already holding it together. Egyptian authorities control every step of access, and protecting the monument usually wins out over public curiosity. Sometimes the responsible move really is just to wait for better, safer scanning tools. That caution, though, created the perfect gap for a myth to grow into. It's called the Hall of Records, a legendary hidden archive supposedly holding lost knowledge from Atlantis, buried somewhere near the Sphinx. The modern version of that story traces back to Edgar Cayce, an American psychic from the 1900s who claimed records of the Atlantis sat near the Sphinx's right paw. There's no archaeological evidence backing that claim at all. But when a real seismic survey later found a real cavity near the front of the monument, believers connected the dots instantly. A scientific anomaly got fused onto a decades-old prophecy, and every new scan since has been treated like one more step toward finally opening it. That story survives because it mixes three powerful ingredients: a real, ancient monument full of gaps in our knowledge, a real unexplained anomaly in the ground, and a myth that just happens to point at roughly the same spot. But a coincidence isn't proof. If archaeologists ever get to actually investigate that space, the responsible approach looks nothing like the Hall of Records story. It means going in assuming nothing. Confirm if it's actually open space at all. Map its exact shape. Check whether its edges look natural or cut by tools. Document everything in place before anything gets moved or removed. The results could land anywhere on a huge scale. A totally natural cavity would still matter to geologists. A carved room with nothing inside would still be a big archaeological find. A chamber tied to known construction from Khafre's era would deepen what we already know, and something that clearly doesn't fit the accepted timeline at all, that would be genuinely revolutionary. But that conclusion can only come after the evidence survives serious scrutiny, not before. It's also worth saying the Sphinx already has known cracks and old human-made openings, and that makes this whole story messier than it first sounds. There's a major fissure running through part of its body. In the 1800s, a British explorer named Howard Weiss drilled into the Sphinx looking for hidden treasure. He found damage, not a secret library. Other small passages have been recorded around its body over the years. Some are natural cracks that got widened by people. Some came from olding. Restoration work. This is exactly why archaeologists found a secret tunnel in the Sphinx. Headlines are usually misleading. Researchers have known for a long time that the Sphinx isn't one solid, crack-free block of stone. The real open question is whether any of these unexplained features were deliberately built as a sealed room with a purpose. And that big front anomaly is still the one that matters most, mainly because nobody has ever gotten a direct look at it. If its size really is close to what's been reported, it's too big to just brush off as nothing. But limestone plateaus are naturally full of cracks and hollow pockets, especially ancient marine limestone like Giza sits on. Scanners can detect that something down there is different. They often can't tell you why it's different. That's a real limitation in geophysics called non-uniqueness, where completely different underground causes can produce almost identical signals. That's exactly why using several methods together matters so much. If seismic data, ground radar, gravity, readings, and muon scans all pointed at the exact same shape in the exact same spot, that would be a strong sign something real is down there. If they disagreed, the whole chamber idea could just dissolve back into ordinary geology. The Sphinx almost seems built to keep people curious. Its nose is missing, and that sparked a myth that Napoleon's soldiers blew it off, which never actually happened. Its head looks small compared to its body, which fuels theories that the face was recarved from something else entirely. Traces of old paint show it once looked completely different from the pale stone tourists see today. It's been patched and repaired across so many centuries that some of what looks ancient is really ancient repair work sitting on top of even older stone. Every generation looks at the same statue and convinces itself that this is finally the moment it gives up its secrets. So here's where things actually stand, laid out all together. There really was a peer-reviewed seismic study, and it really did report cavities under the Sphinx. There really is a large, unexplained anomaly near the front paws that has never been directly investigated. There really are new researchers testing new remote sensing tools at Giza right now, and there genuinely is no physical proof yet for the massive deep structures being described online. All four of those things are true at the exact same time. That's not a cover-up. That's just where the evidence honestly stands today. If Egyptian authorities ever approve a direct investigation of that anomaly, it won't start with a dramatic stone door creaking open. It would start with updated scans, compared against the original 1991 data, mapped out in 3 dimensions. Engineers would look at whether a narrow test hole could even be drilled safely without putting the monument at risk. A tiny camera might go down first, just to see if the space is empty air, packed dirt, cracked rock, or something clearly built by hand. If cut walls turned up, every tool mark would get documented before anyone touched a thing. Any organic material could be dated. Any pigment could be tested. And if that camera showed nothing but a plain, natural crack, that would still answer a question that's sat open for more than 3 decades. The Great Sphinx doesn't need a fake secret room to stay one of the most fascinating monuments on Earth. It has survived sandstorms, floods, invasions, drilling, tourists, and thousands of years of people insisting they'd finally cracked its secret. And right now, hidden underneath its paws, instruments are still picking up something scientists can't fully explain. If the idea that something's still sitting unexplained under a 4,500-year-old monument is the kind of thing that sticks with you, that's exactly the kind of mystery this channel digs into every week. There's actually one more site connected to this exact anomaly we haven't covered yet, and that one's coming next. We won't stop at the easy answer, and neither should you, because right now, the thing buried under the Sphinx isn't treasure. It's uncertainty, still waiting for someone to finally dig deep enough to prove it.